Hey, everyone here at the House Now 3D podcast. We have a really cool guest with us today, John Belkowitz. He's got all kinds of cool things and to share with us. He's just a master in the concrete space. He's a PhD, he's a professional engineer. His role as chief technical officer of a concrete company right now, and he's spent many years with the Air Force and other things. And we're going to just let him introduce himself and kind of the high level overview of all the different things he's done. So, John, thanks for being with us today.
No problem. It's a pleasure, Johnny. Thank you for having me. And to go into a quick, and I'll try not to make it a dissertation about who I am, who we are. I started out in the concrete industry when I had a full head of majestic hair. It was I was about 14 years old.
Could you like flip it and it like it
Oh,
fell over?
dude, it was like, oh, got in my face again. Gosh, can't stand my hair. Now to have one of those days back. Anyway, no,
If
no,
you're
no.
if you're listening to this, folks, let's just say he has it very closely cropped.
Very, very closely cropped. Very shiny. It's very shiny. Um, my start with concrete was back when I was 14 years old and I was working as a mucker's apprentice. And the concrete industry was very, very forgiving to a young kid who had no clue what they were doing. And I quickly found my place in the industry, dialing in trucks. It started out getting like boots and bull floats and coffee, and at the end of the day, I'd come back after school and I'd clean boots and clean up mag floats and brushes, and I would get beers. And if I was lucky, I was allowed to do a little bit of like finishing. So as time progressed, I went to the United States Air Force, where this is in a civil engineering squadron. My job was to provide and prepare bases as the platform for the projection of aerospace equipment around the operational continuum. And
That was
what
a
that
that was a lot of words. That was a lot of words there, John.
I memorized that when I was 18 years old, and I have never forgotten it. And I say it sometimes, I stumble a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, that was
So,
pretty flawless reenact performance
right.
there. But yeah, yeah.
And what that meant was to internalize it. What it meant was my job was to come in as well as part of a larger team, was to come into an airfield and turn it from something that couldn't take aircrafts, that's something that could manage an entire group of aircrafts in and out. And I had a great time too. I got to go all over the world, meet new people, place concrete with them, look at damaged concrete, look at the way people made concrete. Like, people talk about Roman concrete. Forget Roman concrete. They should go to Sri Lanka and see how they make multi-story concrete structures in Sri Lanka. Like, I love 3D printing. I love ICF.
Yes.
But man, oh, Shevitz, they can take a 55-gallon drum, a bunch of materials, and turn it into a 4-story structure. It's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So from there, the military was gracious enough that they started funding or investing in my education. Went to the Air Force Academy. They tripled down on that, especially with concrete. And then, as I got into my career, I started putting more time and effort, and then eventually in the civilian sector, Lafarge North America, man. A really quick story. I was working on something called self-consolidating concrete. And at the time it was very, very new. This is in the way early 2000s. And I had a French boss, like he was, the most brilliant guy that walked the concrete earth.
In his mind, John, or like in people around him. I guess there's always this
Both,
thing. Okay, both.
both.
Okay, so he
And
was smart, and
and
he knew he was smart. Okay,
right. And he smoked cigarettes,
yeah.
and he didn't like people didn't call him by his name. People called him by his initials, JML. Right. So anyway, we're designing this self-consolidating concrete, which is a concrete that consolidates under its own weight due to the force of gravity. It's a very specific mix design. And it's rolling around in this mixer in the lab, and JML sitting there looking at it. And I had been doing mixes and preparing for his visit, and I'm standing there next to him like, so what do you think that slump or that spread is, JML? Like a
Yeah.
26 to a 28-inch spread. And JML looks at me, he goes, "Don't talk about things you don't know, little boy."
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, dude. So that's the thing. Anytime I've gotten interested, like really passionate about concrete, is when somebody started a fight with me. When I was at the Air Force Academy, I was on the concrete canoe team, and I was a bigger guy. I used to row canoes a lot, so it wasn't for concrete. It was just to hang out, drink beers, and row the canoe.
Yeah.
And I went to one of the other team's canoes, and I said, "This is a beautiful freaking canoe. Like, it was gorgeous." And the kid looks at me and he gives me the finger, and I took that. It was a, you know, not nice kid back in the day. I took the
Yeah.
canoe and I flipped it, and didn't break. Concrete canoe got flipped off, light as hell. It was amazing. South Dakota School of Mines. My boss, Captain Tony Jones, drugged me by my ear into the government band and threw a concrete producer magazine at me. And he said, "If you're going to beat them at their own game." I
Yeah.
came back the next year and we beat them in the competition. It's freaking amazing.
Amazing, man. That's
So,
incredible.
so I think that's an awesome way of rounding up that Whitney and I started Intelligent Concrete years ago because we saw a need in the industry for somebody to communicate some of these awesome new and emerging technologies that oftentimes get lost in a university basement to the commerce-based real creed or operational world. And all of that has been based on a lot of the work that I've done over the years. And then, Whitney and I partnered up, and then, started dating and got married, and now
Amazing,
we're
man. I had no idea. I didn't know that was the case.
oh
So yeah, yeah. So thank you for sharing
yeah,
that. Like, I'm just catching up here as we're discussing here. So okay, cool.
I
So
met
that's
my
that.
wife, and our first date was in a concrete lab. I almost broke up with her that night.
Was that a pun? Was that a
Yeah,
pun?
no, 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 no,
You
no, no.
broke
It
up.
was
No,
in
I'm kidding.
seriously, that we broke concrete, and I almost broke up with her too. So yeah,
Uh,
we started working together, and it was her idea to create Intelligent Concrete. But yeah, we've been in business for 15 years now. It's been
that's
awesome.
incredible, and I love that focus as well, John. And we've seen that ourselves. I the founders of House Now 3D, they have they very technical background, but also all related to the field, And it's something we've seen as we've discussed with other academics is the gap, if you would. It's like an air gap between the academic side, and this is actually not. That's
Right.
actually quite common with all academic work and real world or industry. Like getting it out to the public's hands. Amazing ideas, amazing technology, but it's not marketable or people don't know about it. And so that insight you had was, we've seen that as well. So it's incredible that you guys have developed or started a company, obviously not just last year, but 15 years, like you said, and are working on that very problem, and getting these ideas and these technical innovations into into the real world.
Well, talking about that 3D printing, when you say real world, a good buddy of mine named Rich Seishi, and if you want somebody on to interview next, I've got a number to recommend for you.
I
But
love it.
Rich Seishi is definitely one of them, and he is the new chair of ASTM C09, which is the of concrete for ASTMs.
Yeah.
Um, so he and I were talking about 3D printing. Oh, or no. So there are three different types of concrete. There's bookcrete, there's labcrete, and there's realcrete. Right? Now, bookcrete is fun to talk about. It's fun to draw. It's fun to do the math. But labcrete is where we start seeing the things that can help us change that gray concrete coming down the chute to make it more profitable or to do cooler things for us. Give us another tool in the toolbox.
Yeah.
It's not until we transfer that technical monster to the field, which, hey man, 3D printing, I'm very picky about that term, 3D
Okay,
printing.
I love that. Break that down for us. Break that down because
Right.
yes, someone that's as technical as you have seen so many things. You know what you're talking about, and you could bring a lot of nuance, which is there's a lot of nuance that's needed in this area.
Well, even if I don't know everything that I'm talking about, or I'm not, solid and somebody wants to push back, I'm great with that. Remember, there's only two ways to get people motivated in life. And this is not my words. This is Larry Sutter, another ASTM Michigan Tech guy. He said, beer and pizza, right? We're not in
Classic
college, right?
college staples.
We're not in college anymore, so you can't do beer and pizza all the time. And the second way is pissing people off. So if there is somebody who disagree with the things that I'm saying, because they are very polarized, then hey man, I'm happy for the pushback.
Yeah.
So 3D printing is an autonomous way of taking a commodity-based product and turning it into a predetermined geometry, and it should be hands-free besides pushing the button. Okay, there shouldn't be preparation beforehand. There shouldn't be cleanup after the fact. Now, I'm not talking about the other trades and the other utilities that have to be. I'm talking about whatever the geometry is printed. And that could be
Okay.
precast, that could be a home, furniture, pilaster, don't care. Color, non-color. Now, before I go on, and I have pictures I can show you, do you think we're 100% there?
I do not. No, that's anyone that's like spent any time looking at the videos and being on site, looking at machines is absolutely not like far, far, far from that.
I'm going to push back. I like the term pushback. It seems very catchy, call to action. There are some companies, I'm biased. I have some favorites out there. The favorites that I have, because they are as close to as possible to that, Icon 3D,
Yeah. I
they're
saw just if we mention it for the audience here, I saw you had a brief stint there actually on the team on the technical side. That was
yep.
brief. Maybe that's a story we could touch on or not, but that was a quick stint. But go ahead. Yes.
It was such a great time. I have
Dude,
nothing.
but only 5 months. Like you only like a good
No,
time.
we worked as a consultant beforehand,
Oh, okay, yeah.
and then I signed on. But their team was growing way too quickly for a part-time guy.
Ah, okay,
But
yeah,
the way we started working with them, it was Rich Seishi from Texas. He got a phone call that they needed somebody, needed some help with their prints. And we got in touch basically the same way that you got in touch with me. It was just an
yeah.
email, a phone call. And then I had this awesome guy, Jason Ballard, come out
Yeah.
to Colorado with his cowboy hat. And he gave me this pitch, and it was, Jason Ballard, Alex LaRue, Evan Loomis, excuse me. They've created an amazing team, and this was at the early stages of the team. So there were
Yeah,
50 people. They'd only printed the Chacon house, and they wanted our help with a lot of the projects with the Marines, with NASA, and all of it was optimizing the formulas, the equipment, and the team. I have nothing but great things to say about their team, their products. They are very focused on a certain type of sector in the industry. So I find that there aren't many folks who compete with them in their sector. And I can't speak for you guys, but when it comes to competitors, not that they make the best of the best, there are people who change places with them when it comes to the end product, but when it comes to the overall system, to me, theirs is the closest push button that you can get to.
sure. Yeah, okay.
When
Kind of
I
with this idealized statement that you let out with, like, hey, this is the idealized, I'm projecting this idealized version of what 3D concrete printing should be. And then to that idea, that idealized state, Icon is matching that the most closely.
would say Icon, I would also put Apis Core. This picture, this is from one of the Apis Core YouTube videos on their Dubai Guinness Book of World Record multi-story construction. And my favorite part of that video, and I use this with investors, is this picture right here, that they've got somebody on site, construction is going on, but there's only one person on site, and he's
Yes.
reading a book. Right? Like if you're an investor and you can't see hey, I'm about to show you the hype curve and where I think we're at right now. And it's not a very
Yeah.
picture, and it is a call to action, but I invested in real estate too. 3D printed concrete is the Disney of concrete construction. And if you don't see its worth through this picture, then I mean, you're going to be left in the dust. I'm a big proponent of 3D printing, but I'm also very honest with myself and
Yes,
the
man. That's what we need, and we need a lot of that. We need to be straight talk, people that are really deeply about these things, and which is why I'm having a great time with our discussion here. So, continue.
Please. So there was a wonderful article published back in 2002 by Wired magazine that goes into something called the hype curve. And every single technology goes through the hype curve. And there are 5 phases, and some technologies go through the hype curve faster, and other technologies don't make it all the way through the hype curve.
Thank you, AI.
Thank you, A. And when it comes to construction materials, you say thank you, AI. I'm actually thank you 1985 here, because remember, we're talking about concrete construction. And we're talking about construction, which the dynamics of it hasn't changed for almost 200 years.
Yeah.
Anything we're doing, the concept of a new and emerging technology in the concrete industry, if it came out in 1900, between now, it's still considered new. Like there are people still considering pervious concrete as new, which is concrete that allows water to pass through it. And that was developed in the 1800s.
Yes.
So when we look at a new technology, there are 5 stages. When the technology is triggered, the peak of inflated expectations, the trough of disillusionment, the slope of enlightenment, the plateau of productivity. And not everything can be an iPhone, right? You remember when everybody was triggered, technology triggered to buy an iPhone. There were people standing in line. Yes. And it got worse when people were told you have everything. You have 10,000 songs in your hand, a computer in your hand. We have a peak of inflated expectations. And then what happened? The iPhone 3 comes out. And if you hold it the wrong way, the antenna doesn't work. And all of a sudden we fall into this trough of disillusionment. It's not just the iPhone. Nokia makes a crap version, or not Nokia. Android makes a version of this. Everybody. So there was this dichotomy of, is this iPhone really magical, or is it just a touch screen version of the smartphone? And then ultimately we came to this slope of enlightenment that it doesn't matter what smartphone you use, everybody's going to use smartphones. And that's where we have come to this plateau of productivity. 3D printing, we're not there yet. 3D printing, we had the technology trigger, what, 2016, 2018, somewhere in that window?
Yes.
You had Contour Craft, you had NASA, you had, who else, Whitney? Those crazy guys from the Midwest. You know that guy who made his kid a castle, Anton, whatever his name was. You know, they were really kicking off, and they were the champions carrying the torch. God bless them, because everybody was crazy.
Yeah.
Then folks started building houses. Like, okay, I'm not building castles in the back of my kid, for my kid. I'm not going to the moon.
Was that guy? Was that the guy from Minnesota, John?
He's from Minnesota, and he has a name like a Marvel villain.
Yeah, he's like a Russian kind of sounding.
Andrei Butenko. Yeah, I often confuse him with the guy from Iron Man 2 or 3. Iron Man 2.
I talked to him, I think like a couple months ago. He's actually down in Dallas doing some work. Yeah, so but that's the last time I talked to him. Yeah. He
should be considered like Bernoulli is considered. Right. And I know I might be inflating his ego, but he is the father of modern concrete. Somebody should make up a t-shirt. See, that's the problem. We don't have the Bernoulli equation, but of the modern, in the modern day and age. And I would definitely say that, in my opinion,
Yeah.
the one who set off the technology trigger. I remember seeing
That's a broader problem, John. We don't of here not having heroes, we have anti-heroes, but we don't have like, the protagonists, the traditional hero, which is why people have trouble like identifying and finding things. But yeah, but anyway, so
he's
yeah.
my hero.
Okay, yeah. No,
That's what I'm trying to
we get
say.
that.
Yeah, he's totally my hero. So what
So
he
you
got
think
us
the
to
3D concrete printing here is it just past the very apex of the curve, right?
right back in, what was it, 2021, 22, when it was just after the pandemic and we all went back to the world of concrete. That's when, 3D printing was huge out there. And that to me was the peak, or the start of the peak of inflated expectations. And what happened is now contractors and entrepreneurs like yourself started trying to buy the equipment.
Right.
And they couldn't buy the equipment because a lot of these people who were designing the equipment, they weren't salespeople. They were mechanical engineers. They were graduates from Harvard, Stanford, who can build things, but they couldn't run a business.
Yeah.
And then once they started selling those and the contractors got the equipment and material, now it's not push button. Now you need to have an expert on the crew who can handle the changes and not just the mix design, but the way that the extruded mix needs to respond to the ambient environment. And this is what
multiple experts, oftentimes handful of experts, to be honest.
Handful of experts. And to me, we are not at the original definition that I threw out there. If I buy an HP printer or a Dell printer or a Xerox, I don't print it and say, oh, let me go get my white out because I don't want this in there. And let me go get a marker and I want to draw. No, I print it unless I'm laminating it or something. I print it and it's done.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I love that, man. I love where you're going with this. And it's like, if there's a problem with the ink, like, oh, let me call in the chemist, and like, I think there's something wrong, with the
chemist's not going to come out there and take the cartridge out and let me shake it up. No, that's not right, man. Let me go to get some chemicals from the truck. Like it's not
reconstitute this. Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. I'm not trying to throw shade. Is that how the kids say it nowadays?
Even that's a little dated, but yeah, I say that too.
Right. To get to the trough or through the trough of disillusionment, you've got to get past those failures. I have a wonderful family member who lives in Colorado. He's old. The man is older than dirt. And he's been building houses in the Western US business unit since the 70s. And he builds beautiful custom homes. And he's older than dirt, so he can't swing a hammer and he's got to rely on subcontractors. And I asked him, went to a job site of his. He was building 6 homes, gorgeous homes. They were almost done, but he's waiting on one of his carpenters, to build out some portion of the deck. I said, Uncle Richard, wouldn't it be flipping awesome if you could just push a button, come back the next morning and everything is done?
Yes.
He said, of course, mate. I'd love that. And I said, well, there are 3D printers that you can buy. He goes, oh, forget that. I don't want that academic science fiction. And going back to what you said, getting this in the hands of the contractors who are at the ground level, willing to be entrepreneurs, willing to look outside the proverbial box, is important to get us out of the trough of disillusionment, because they're going to help us refine these approaches. Remember, I said most of these people who started these businesses were either people who were really good with pumps or people who came out of university, weren't really concrete people. Once you get the people who are using this product all the time to play with the technology, and this is a call to action to the contractors of the world, the entrepreneurs, the real estate execs, and we just can't build houses that we're giving away for free. I love that. I love that we're trying to, and Jason Ballard, he sold me. The reason why I decided to go to Texas, and I'm not a fan of Texas, was that Jason Ballard wanted to end homelessness due to natural disaster with 3D printed homes.
Yeah.
And the story, the direction, it hit me right here, man. And I sacrificed a lot of time with my family and kids to help them grow, and I'm proud of that. But there are a lot of companies that follow suit, and a lot of the houses that they're printing and giving away are crap prints. They're
poor quality.
They're low quality. They're dangerous. They're not certified to be lived in, but you're giving them away from free in third world countries. So there is a need to keep the momentum going, but now the call to action is start holding ourselves to a higher standard, being more critical of, just because we printed a house on the East Coast, we don't have to all give each other high fives. We printed another house. So, everybody's printing houses. Now we got to print pretty houses, structurally stable homes. And
what is that? So what is the list of criteria that you see? So we went from, so you kind of like defined it, you have the definition, John, and then you kind of walk us through some of the other things here. So what are those like, I don't know, 3 or 4 things that we must be now considering right now?
Considering right now for 3D printing is how the material and printer respond printing in an imperfect world. Now,
oh no, sorry. So no, let's go there. Hang with me 1 sec.
Sure.
Reverse to what you just said about the quality aspect, like pretty homes, homes with structural integrity, things like that. What are those things that we need to be now focused on? Like we end up in a third world country or a disaster area. We give us, we're all excited, and we sell a lot of backslapping. We did a great job. What are the things we need to be looking at now on the outcome, like the non-technical side? People that are like, they don't care about pumps and concrete strength. Like it's like, what does this house need to meet?
Right. So this is what we want our print to look like.
It's gorgeous, by the way. If people are listening, this is gorgeous, layered lines of 3D concrete printing. You can see an older original pour or print, and then there's like a fresh print on top of that. But either way, it's very, very consistent and beautiful.
I would, when this was printed, I would say we were at, let me be generous with this, 85% autonomous.
Okay.
Right? I want to make it a rudimentary illustration. So I've taken that same image that Johnny has described, and now I've created a cartoon out of it. And this is what we want our wall to look like. The unfortunate reality is, and what that means is what you just saw, what Johnny just described, is we get a consistent bead every time the printer is printing. No matter the ambient temperature, the relative humidity, irrespective of the hose, the printer, everything that you just said, with little to no need for human intervention.
Yes.
But of course, then we have the ambient environment, which does what it wants to do. And that leads to layers dripping. And by the way, so I don't piss anybody off, I took images and I turned them into illustration, but these were real homes that were printed by folks here in the United States. Okay. So what I'm showing Johnny right now is a print where the layers are dripping down. Then you have prints where there are sausage links instead of beads. And if you've done
voids, you have voids. And again, this is like, there's like voids if you're squishing out some, some type of product and it's not consistent. There's like big gaps, cracks, gaps, inconsistencies, voids. And it's like, well, what the hell? Like, aren't bugs and moisture and dirt and everything else gonna like get in there and look terrible? And the answer is yes.
Not only that, but we're talking about the concrete work in some cases acts as the structural integrity. That shell acts as the structural integrity of the home, especially some of these homes that are, domes. Now we're introducing areas that we're going to be concerned for physical and chemical attack. It's not just the steel that gets corroded. Concrete corrodes through carbonation attack, chloride attack, salt attack from other alkalis and sulfates. So it's not just these that we've seen, it's also this.
Yeah.
There's just huge openings and layer changes, and the inconsistencies often lead to premature failure from long-term cracking, and then it's just a vicious cycle.
Yeah, so, and then of course, just real quick, just for people so can stay with us here. This kind of thing will bring the industry down. Like if you like go out there and print 1,000 homes and you don't have this stuff like figured out and solved, and you have like massive lawsuits and houses collapsing and terrible degradation in 5 years, 10 years, and environmental hazards and people, all these kinds of things. It's going to like people, this will destroy the industry because there'll be lawsuits. No one will want to build it. They won't be insurable. And it'll be like, people will say, yeah, that was a flop. It was never perfected, never could get it right. And it'll terminate it.
And this has happened before. So what you're saying, you're almost clairvoyant here. Your history has a tendency to repeat itself. And what we know about the construction industry is make it simple, make it repeatable, and make it available. And right now, to some degree, it is simple. To an degree, it's available. And on a case-by-case basis, it is repeatable. And when we talk about what should we worry about when you're going out to print something, you've got to be aware of your ambient conditions. And I'll go really quick through this. And if you're not aware of your ambient conditions, print in a bubble. Create a huge bubble. You can go to DRMO. You can buy these huge bubbles. They're tents. You can get environmental control unit, and you can create or control temperature, RH, even the UV irradiation in a bubble, right? When you're printing, oftentimes folks don't ask themselves what they want. We've gotten to the point where we have printers that print detail, and then we have printers that print fast. And I'm talking about cementitious ink, not plastics or metals. So a lot of people don't ask themselves that question. They just say, hey, what's the cheapest and best and most autonomous printer that I can get? And they go out to the job site, and then all of a sudden, well, that's not printing fast enough. I need to start making changes to my equipment. And then it lies, the question is, does our mix match our equipment? Because if I have a 50-foot long hose with one mix, if I then change my hose to 125 feet, can't use the same mix. I'm losing too much paste from sacrificial in that hose, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, ultimately, all these questions should be answered because I'm a big advocate on documentaries for my kids. I love torturing my kids with documentaries. My wonderful wife is sitting here. We used to watch the last or the furthest Voyager in space every Sunday. It's like what is it, a 3-hour documentary?
A couple hours, yeah.
I would fall asleep during the doc. I would force my kids to watch it. And it talks about the Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 satellites that did the outer planetary tour back in the late 60s through the Earth or through the mid or 2012 when it went to interstellar space. And one of the things that they say is that a satellite, you can't bring it back. When you cast it out into the void, you can't string it back. Like a Boy Scout or like a pioneer of old, you have to go out with everything that you're going to use to make the objectives happen. So the same thing with 3D printing. If you're not willing to be a Boy Scout, Girl Scout, an Israeli Scout, I don't care what type of scout, but do the homework, and you'll find that courageousness comes with preparedness. And that's oftentimes what we don't see in 3D printing. There's still that, hey, we got money, there's capital, let's get out there and print as fast as we can. In lieu of, there are things that we still need to work on. And that's where I think we're at, a call to action.
So then what's the recommendation then, John? So like on a practical level, so you see all these people out there and you're really so closely familiar with all the different parties out there. You have the manufacturers, you have the excited contractors, you have the excited technical people like yourself, or maybe you're not excited, but like you have all this, ability to do like cementitious ink and all that kind of stuff. All these different parties, and like you're trying to converge like this knowledge, like this. You have these like you want the Venn diagram to start overlapping more and more and have a shared knowledge in the space here. So what are those next steps? How do you converge, blend the different domains of knowledge into something that actually ends up with where you have the your idealized, what you think is an idealized 3D concrete printing setup or machine? What does it look like? What needs to happen specifically? Like what do people need to focus on? If you go to a conference, what do you tell people? Like, you've got a good printer, and Lafarge, you got cool, and concrete and Quikrete, you got your cool mix. So how do you bring all this stuff together?
Right. It's more of an ideology, and I'm not trying to get all philosophical here.
Okay.
My father once asked me, Jonathan, what's the toughest workout in the gym? What's the toughest exercise in the gym? And I said, oh, it's probably the Smith machine, doing squats. He goes, nope. And I said, well, then it's the bench press. Let's go rudimentary, right? Flat bench. He goes, nope. He goes, you want one more chance? I said, no, just tell me. He says, walking through the front door. And it happens to be what we need to do is persevere.
Okay.
The more that we chide ourselves and give each other slaps on the back and high fives that are unwarranted, the more likely what you said is going to happen, that we're going to lose momentum and all this great investment of time and resources into a brilliant freaking idea. Because let's be honest, Johnny, of all the ideas we've had in concrete, I mean, there are some really cool ones out there. This is the first idea in 200 years that bridges the ready-mix side, the engineering side, and the contractors. I should say the engineers, the ready-mix, and the contractors, right?
Okay.
So that's
Yeah.
the bookcrete, the labcrete, the realcrete. Like,
I hadn't thought of that, but I love that method or that thinking, that framework.
right, and that's why it's so tough, because we're not just convincing just the engineers. It's not. If it was just the engineers, then okay, we have our tasks ahead of us. We know what to do, but we're convincing multiple different parties that have their own love language, their own way to speak to them. But then, of course, we're also dealing with an entity that is very hard to predict, and that's the owners. Not only do we have to satisfy the people who make and deliver the concrete, sometimes that's the same person who build the homes, but it's also the engineers. And then does it look good? So there's the architect and the homeowners. And, it's like getting a mortgage in New Jersey. Anytime you bring more people into the equation, the likelihood of having jerks and, people just screw things up increases. It's like getting a mortgage in New Jersey. So what I think that we need to do is persevere, and that's going to require money. That's going to require people not lying to each other. That's going to require waste. A lot of these 3D printing companies promise zero waste.
Yes, almost at all their many of their websites they say that as a selling piece, and it's actually, there's massive waste. There's actually more waste. It's very difficult to do, and you're from what I've seen, I haven't done it yet, but we will be relatively soon. You're doing it 4, 5, 6 times, knocking it down, doing it again. Just say it, like you said.
Right? It's all in the sake of research, and not research for the sake of research. It's not even research for the sake of commerce. It's research for the sake of growth. We ask these questions: how did the Egyptians build these awesome things? Someday somebody should ask, how did these humans automate what Mother Nature takes millions or thousands of years, depending on your religious affiliation? So I know, I can see the writing on the wall that there is a loss in momentum with certain sectors of the 3D printing arena for 3D PC Inc. By the way, I want to claim creation of that term. I didn't trademark it, I didn't copyright it, but I'm going to claim it. And the reason I came up with that term was so I could piss people off and get them involved in ACI 564, the 3D printing committee. What I think is going to happen is people are going to get pissed off. And unless there is a serious group that has the funding to overcome the obstacles that are ahead, then it is going to lose momentum. And there's a chance that it, might fall off the face, just like you remember that original stylus notepad? It was called the IQ, or, back in the late 90s.
A little fuzzy on that one. No, I'm sure I saw it. It was, a little bit. I wasn't a little younger then, so I wasn't really.
Right. So when I was in high school back in the mid 90s, I went to a high school called High Technology High School. It's computer-based school. 40 kids per class, and we got all these really cool computers. I hated it. Couldn't stand computers. But one of the things they gave to you was this little handheld device. It wasn't a phone. It was basically a notepad, and you had a stylus, and it was one of those screens. It was only one color, right? And you wrote in this little area, and then it turned your writing into a text up
Okay.
top.
Yeah.
And of course, those concepts, they totally fell away until we had the BlackBerry and then the iPhones. So I am a little nervous that we might lose momentum,
Yeah.
because the hardest part is still ahead of us. And that's the trudging through the failures and the lawsuits. Now, you said that earlier, Johnny, and you know the great thing about the United States, brother? We sue each other all the effing time. So we're not afraid of lawsuits. As a matter of fact, that's why most people have insurance, so they don't have to worry about lawsuits. So
Yeah.
I think you're not wrong, man. You're absolutely right. We are going to have the lawsuits. We are going to have the failures. My hope is we can trudge through that.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, that's an awesome place to wrap up here. I can tell you're just a deep wealth of knowledge. I'm sure your wife is an amazing woman too, and you
He's
guys
all right.
could both get on and just share so much information and knowledge here. But that's a good place to wrap it up here. We'll probably have, if it's okay with you, maybe we'll have you on in a while again. We'll talk about more things on the House Now 3D podcast. But thank you for sharing all that, going through all those things. That presentation you had, would there, maybe that's proprietary, I'm sure you worked hard at. Is there a way that able to share that with my audience, or what's your feelings or thoughts on that?
I got a link where I give the entire presentation, man. So it's a YouTube video. So I'll just
Amazing.
share the YouTube link with you, man.
I appreciate that. I appreciate it. So anyway, thank you, House Now 3D guests, for going along with us, for listening to John and myself talk, swap stories and just kind of talk, about real practical things and just real life stories, and then the challenges, of course, that John is so intimately familiar with in the space, and then of course, kind of a central tenet was this, kind of the hype curve. And that's a really, really important thing to keep in mind, from like the mass adoption, mass psychology, just social adoption. So we get all lost in the details and the technology, but then it's so much of that is tied into where, as a society, where we are within the hype curve, and things can die. This may not actually continue. We think it will, but it may not. So John, I'll give you the final word. Take us out, and we'll wrap it up.
Thanks for having me. I mean, this is what we need to do, educating the industry. I mean, the one constant is we know that concrete can do the job. Now we just have to take advantage of all its value-added performance. So thanks for having me on, and keep doing what y'all are doing.
Awesome. Hey, later.